There was a time in Britain when discipline wasn't something you discussed at length, softened with explanations, or followed by reassurance. Parents didn't ask how a punishment made you feel. They didn't negotiate boundaries or offer multiple chances. They believed childhood was preparation for a demanding world, and that structure, authority, and consequences were part of love, even if they didn't always feel like it in the moment. Respect came first. Obedience came before understanding. And discipline wasn't something that happened eventually. It happened immediately. Looking back now, many of these moments feel shocking. Some feel uncomfortable. Others make us laugh nervously because we recognize them all too well. Not because parents were cruel, but because expectations were clear, authority was unquestioned, and consequences were certain. These weren't rare or extreme punishments. They were everyday experiences, shared quietly by millions of British children across kitchens, classrooms, buses, shops, and streets. So let's look back, not to praise it, not to condemn it, but to remember how discipline once worked, and why these memories still sit so clearly in our minds decades later. Number 1. Shame used deliberately as a lesson. One of the most powerful tools British parents used wasn't physical punishment at all. It was embarrassment. If you misbehaved, your parents didn't always wait until you were safely behind closed doors. You were corrected where you stood, in front of siblings, in front of visitors, sometimes in front of complete strangers. Being told off publicly was meant to hurt, not physically, but socially. Parents believed shame created memory. If you felt embarrassed enough, you wouldn't repeat the behavior. It wasn't considered damaging. It was considered effective. Children learned early that behavior wasn't just personal. It reflected on the family. And letting your parents down in front of others felt far worse than any quiet punishment at home. Number 2. Being disciplined in public and nobody stepping in. Today, if a parent raised their voice or smacked a child in public, phones would appear instantly. Back then, the reaction was very different. Other adults watched and nodded. If you were grabbed by the arm in Woolworths, clipped round the leg in the post office queue, or sharply corrected on the bus, nobody intervened. In fact, some strangers openly approved. A quiet, "good on you" wasn't uncommon. Public discipline wasn't controversial, it was responsible parenting. Children weren't entitled to privacy when misbehaving. Correction happened immediately wherever you were. You learned very quickly that public spaces weren't neutral zones, they were discipline zones. Number 3. Having your mouth washed out with soap. Swearing, answering back, or saying something disrespectful could lead straight to the sink. There was no long lecture, no warning, just soap. Real soap. Often imperial leather. And not a polite dab either, enough that you tasted it long after the lesson landed. Parents genuinely believed this cleaned your language, and in fairness, it worked. Mostly because once you'd experienced it, you became extremely careful with your vocabulary. Today, the idea horrifies people. Back then, it was a practical solution to disrespect. Number 4. The threat being enough. In many homes, punishment didn't even need to happen. A cane kept in a cupboard, a slipper placed deliberately on the table, a wooden spoon hanging quietly on a hook in the kitchen. Often, these objects were rarely used. They didn't need to be. Their presence alone created discipline. Children behaved because they knew what could happen, and that certainty kept things under control. Fear didn't come from action. It came from possibility. Number 5. Isolation as punishment. Being sent to your room wasn't about calm reflection, it was about removal. You were separated from the family, from noise, from comfort. Sometimes the door was closed firmly behind you, sometimes actually locked. Parents believed silence did the work shouting couldn't. You sat alone with your thoughts, replaying everything you'd done wrong, staring at the wall, listening to muffled sounds of life continuing downstairs without you. When the door finally opened, there was no discussion, no apology. The punishment had happened, and that was the end of it. Number 6. Being hit with whatever was nearby. Discipline wasn't always planned. Sometimes it was immediate, instinctive. Whatever happened to be within reach, a slipper, a spoon, a hairbrush. It wasn't about injury, it was about authority, about reminding you instantly where the line was and who controlled it. Today, even the idea causes outrage. Back then, it barely raised an eyebrow. Number 7. Being physically removed from shops. There was no bargaining. If behavior crossed the line, your parent grabbed your arm and marched you straight out. Mid-tantrum, mid-argument, mid-anything. The punishment was immediate and final, and everyone watching understood exactly why it was happening. You learned very quickly that once a parent decided enough was enough, there was no way back. Number 8. Teachers using physical discipline with parental support. Discipline didn't stop at home. It followed you to school. Teachers were allowed to hit children, and parents often supported it fully. If you were punished at school, the worst part usually came later, when your parents found out. Instead of sympathy, you were punished again. The logic was simple. If a teacher disciplined you, you must have deserved it. Parents and teachers were firmly on the same side. Children stood alone. Number 9. Being punished for tone, not behavior. Often, what you did mattered less than how you reacted afterwards. A sigh, a look, a muttered comment. Even silence could make things worse. Children learned quickly that questioning authority was dangerous. Respect wasn't optional, it was enforced. Tone mattered, attitude mattered. And once a parent decided you'd crossed the line, the original issue almost became irrelevant. Number 10. Being told to pack your things. Few sentences struck fear like this one. If you carry on like that, you won't be living here much longer. Nobody meant it literally, but as a child, it felt terrifyingly real. You imagined bags, strangers, doors closing forever. Parents used it because it worked instantly. Children didn't yet understand exaggeration, only consequences. Number 11. Discipline extending beyond the home. You couldn't escape discipline by leaving your house. If you misbehaved on the street, neighbors felt entitled to correct you. And when you got home, your parents didn't defend you. They backed the neighbor. Parents had an invisible communication network faster than Wi-Fi. If you heard, "I've already spoken to your mother," you knew it was over. Number 12. Forced apologies, face to face. If you upset someone, you didn't text, you didn't write a note. You were marched to their door and made to apologize while looking them in the eye. The walk there was agony, but parents believed this built humility, courage, and accountability, and in many cases, it did. Number 13. Losing privileges instantly. Television, pocket money, going out to play. Privileges weren't phased out gradually. They were removed instantly, sometimes without explanation. sometimes without warning. Children learned quickly that good behavior maintained access to joy, and bad behavior removed it. Number 14. Punishment that was certain. Perhaps the biggest difference of all was certainty. When parents said something, they meant it. No counting, no negotiating, no second chances. Children always knew where the line was, and oddly enough, that clarity often made them feel safe. Number 15. They never backed down. Once a punishment was decided, it stood. Parents didn't reverse decisions because you cried, or begged, or promised to behave, and that finality, frightening at the time, is something many people now remember as strangely grounding. Looking back, these methods weren't gentle. Some were frightening, some would never be allowed today. But they didn't come from cruelty. They came from a belief that discipline, structure, and firm boundaries were acts of care. We don't need to bring them back. But remembering them helps us understand how childhood once worked, and why these memories still linger so strongly. Which one do you remember most clearly? And which one would cause the biggest outrage today?